Good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so by the following manner: by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording transcript or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after them. So, call the meeting to order at 7:38. We need a roll call vote.
Sorry, Mimi, just before we start, I think Katura is in the attendees list. Are we able to promote her, Sarah?
Yep.
Yes, I will. I'll promote her up right now. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Katrina.
Welcome. Thank you. Good to be here. Glad my other meeting got over.
Yes, us too.
Non-stop today, huh?
I know.
Victoria, we were commenting just before you joined that we're so grateful we're not on the school committee. That marathon set of meetings recently is a killer.
It's been a little nuts. I know.
We look great by comparison.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad. I mean, we've made a lot of progress and a lot of good work being done. And I mean, honestly, those of us on the school committee are doing nothing compared to everybody doing everything to make things operational. So we're very grateful for everybody.
All right, we were just going to take a roll call vote to start the meeting. Luttrell here, Braccio
Here.
McKee
Here.
Stivers,
Here,
Watson,
Yeah.
Lazarmitsky,
Here.
Steins,
here,
Davidovich,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Warren.
here.
Very good. So our first item on the agenda is to review the documents that were put together by Sarah and Judith at the last meeting.
Okay, do you want me to try and summarize the changes, Mimi?
Sure.
Okay. Right, let me come out of that. I did open them up, but let me see if I can get them. Can you, are you able to let me share?
Oh, yes.
Sarah,
Sorry
thank
about that. There you go.
In Joyce is in the attendees list also. If she
Alrighty, let me promote her. There we go. All set.
Okay. So I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to look at this updated version. We're actually on version 4 right now. I think Mimi put it in the shared drive. This is I haven't had a lot of detailed feedback on the document, on either of the documents. So these are primarily changes that I've made as I've gone through and just looked at it, trying to tighten it up. And one of the key things that Sam had asked is that we make the storyboard document consistent with this model, which I've now done. And also, as I went through, you know, we talked a little bit at the last meeting about some of the gaps that were still there. So in an effort to kind of try and keep us moving forward, I've actually plugged in a couple of things that we can talk about as to whether or not they actually do fill a gap. So let me just start. Can everyone see this? I know it's small, but that it's trying to get it.
Yeah, I
on
can
what-
see it.
Okay, perfect. So there's a couple of things I do want to come back to in a little while, and that's the vision and the oops, that's not going to show the
Hey,
vision
Judith?
and what I call a position statement.
Judith, if I could interrupt for 1 second, anybody can actually, with the view options on Zoom, blow it up to bigger number
Mm-hmm.
and read that up at the top. There's a scroll down thing that touches the original size or bigger sizes. So you can individually control the size and read things back.
Oh, okay. I'm sure
Those of us with failing eyesight look for those kind of opportunities to
Yes, for sure we do.
blow things up.
Thank you, Sam. That's very helpful.
So let me come back to these two items in red when I've just gone through the summary, because those are two things that I think we need to try and hash out tonight. But if I go back to the other changes, so one of the things that we talked about in the last meeting was making sure that readers are clear in our own, when they read the plan, as to the relationship between the sections in our plan and what's in the Massachusetts state requirements for a master plan. So what I did is I actually have put that in here. So, and I think the mapping is actually pretty good. We do map, even though we use different language, our objectives actually map pretty well to the Massachusetts model. So I think, you know, that kind of ticks that that particular action. The other thing I've done here is just, we had sub goals for some of these overall goals. And what I've done is actually taken those out and just put them under the headings of the recommendations, because it just felt that we were getting too many levels there. And I've also separated out commercial diversity and public services into two different objectives. When we'd consolidated them back in the fall, when we did the major themes, because Sam volunteered to kind of take the lead on both the commercial diversity and public you know, the public services and resiliency and schools and a couple of others, it made sense to kind of put those into one group, but I separated them out because I do think it maps better to the recommendations if we can do that, and also maps to the Massachusetts model better. We had agreed at the last meeting to have this section at the bottom. It's kind of a new section. It's not really in the Massachusetts model, but I think we agreed that it's important for us, which we call strategic enablers. And this is really about where we would look at the population build out and the expanded funding mechanisms. So those are the objectives that sit there. Let me just flip over housing strategies and recreation for a minute, because that I think needs a bit more discussion. But I did just kind of flesh out some of the language on improved accessibility. These, we had placeholder goals in there So I've just wordsmithed those a little bit just to try and get the consistency with the rest of the model. So everything that's in blue has changed from the first version. So it's incredibly difficult to do tracking on an Excel document. So I just decided that doing a different color was a better option. And then I think the other piece that I've done here, and I think Gina made a very good point that the downtown initiative didn't really come out that strongly. We had it under commercial diversity. So I've actually consolidated that and moved the downtown from commercial diversity under sense of community, because there were a number of different points around that that downtown and village center in sense of community. And I know in previous meetings, we spent quite a lot of time talking about the importance of that. And then I guess just to come back, the other two items where I've added some material is around the housing strategy. So when we looked at this document the last meeting, and it's a shame Tom's not here actually, we had the goals that were taken out of the housing production plan, but we didn't have any recommendations. And I, without having got anything back from Tom, I just put in the housing strategies from that housing production plan, because then at least we've got something that we can kind of talk about. Are those the right ones? That's something we should come back to.
Judith, not to interrupt, Tom is at another meeting for work and he's hoping to join us at some point this evening. He and I did have an opportunity to talk a little more about the housing section and flesh that out. So when we get back to it, I can give an update if he's not present.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
And then the other area that there was a kind of a
Turn off your TV.
that there was a gap here was on recreation. So I've added in the main recommendation.
Well, I
Sorry.
think somebody needs to put their phone on mute. Somebody who has a TV in the background.
Could everybody actually just mute themselves? That would probably be best.
Happiness and well-being at the center of public policy making. Is happiness a state of mind? We'll find out.
Thank you.
Okay. So recreation is still, I think, a challenge at the moment. And I don't know, Mimi, whether you've had a chance to try and get hold of someone on the recreation committee, but so what was in the original model were actually the objectives from the 2016 Open Space and Rec Plan. And they're still in the main body of the report, but now there's actually more specific recommendations. They call them a goal and objective, whereas we use the term objective and then goal, but it's the same relative structure. So I've just kind of put those in from the most recent plan. But I think we've got to try and get to a point where we know what it is that the rec team actually wants in the master plan.
Judith, if I could interject here, I've actually been to a few of the rec committee meetings recently, and I've heard Tim Davis say that he is interested in getting connected with this. So I'm disappointed he's not here tonight, but I think the door is open to reach out to him and ask him to maybe flesh out from their strategic plan which pieces need to flow into here. And my sense is he would be more than happy to contribute to that. So
That's great to hear, Sam. I reached out to them a couple of times and haven't heard from them. And I know with getting the open space and rec plan approved, and then with a change of leadership there, it's been a little confusing, but I just want to make sure they feel like their voice is being heard and that it is heard and reflected in the report.
Yep, and again, they have continued to express interest, but Dave Candela was in the group, and he's apparently gotten pulled away by other issues, and so Tim indicated that he was interested in filling that gap and providing the appropriate input for us. So again, I think the door's open. We need to follow up and encourage and do what we can to get what he wants to contribute here.
I can send them what we have and ask for input from, I'll send it to Tim.
Okay.
And
That would be awesome, Mimi. I think that's great.
and
Yeah.
copy the chair.
And then the other thing I have just done here is added just a little model on implementation plan, but because we'd started to talk about that in the last meeting, and when I looked at the minutes, I thought, oh, it's probably worth just putting that in here to start the ball rolling. So
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about the implementation plan?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So I noticed that you mentioned boards and commissions. Was that just an omission to not include committees? Or was it, was there a specific reason not to include committees?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Kat, because when I look at your example, Judith, which I know was created in the best of intentions, actually, when I think of engaging community to help maintain trails, I think of the Trails Committee, not the Open Space Commission that would be responsible for that. Is that why you're bringing it up, Kat?
Not, well, it's not the reason I'm bringing it up, but it is. I did notice that too, but I thought because it's an example, it was just an example used. But I was more interested to understand if we meant to say boards, commissions, and committees. I know it's a long text of words, but I just wanted to check on the intentions there.
No, it's intended to be all and everybody, all and every groups. I think that, so boards, commissions, committees, I guess the only, and Sam, maybe this is one you or Lisa can speak to, is my sense is that that this master plan is not intended to cover strategic plans or kind of annual plans that are put together by what I would call the town departments. So it's not intended to cover, the fire plan or the police chief's plan or youth and family services or I don't know, the DPW kind of strategic plans.
I don't know, Judith. I don't know if Lisa has a different view of this, but it seems to me that there is value in some effort to be at least consistent with what those groups are thinking and doing. I don't see that it should be necessarily a natural plug-in to include everybody's plans in this process. But it seems to me that there's value in sort of doing a high-level review and confirming that what we come up with is at least generally directionally consistent with what the various departments and other groups. And the other one that we've talked about previously, Katura has not been along for a while with this, but the schools are the glaring omission from the 2008 master plan. And so we're making a big effort to at least, again, recognize the importance of the role of the schools as we think about the future of the community and include what's appropriate from the strategic planning that the schools have been doing. And I think we're on the right path for that, but there's more work there. So I think, again, to this point, it's valuable to be inclusive with everybody in town in some way or other, at least work to not have conflict. Or if we do, figure out how to put it on a parking lot list or something and say, this is an issue that we need to work on more out of the plan versus trying to drive for total consistency across the world here.
Okay.
That's my personal view. I don't know, Lisa, do you have a different view of how to?
No, Sam, I agree with you 100%.
And this is Karen, and I think I agree with you as well, Sam. And I think that in some cases the plans are being approved at different times, so they may not be 100% consistent, and that feels really overwhelming to think, how can we keep track of all these plans? But if the individuals that are part of this committee, for example, for me with the Open Space and Rec plan, kind of look at the master plan and keep the context of the other plan in mind, I think we can get that general consistency. And we can tweak this example of yours, Judith, just to change it to the Trails Committee, for example, so that people
Yeah,
don't,
no, that's
you know,
a great
it's just,
point.
it's a
That I
small little
totally-
detail, but
Yeah,
for
no,
some
no,
people,
no, but
it'll
it's
feel like
good
a big detail. Yeah,
but it's
I
good
should have
one.
caught that before in my feedback and I didn't. Yeah.
And Karen, good point to reemphasize that those on the group here now who have not been along for the overall ride, I think one of the explicit desires originally for having a relatively large committee was to make sure that we did have reasonable representation from across the broad
That's
span
right.
of activities in town. So members of this committee could go back to their respective groups and maintain some degree of that consistency, or at least flag areas of inconsistency. So, and I think that's worked very well so far.
I
and
agree.
that we ought to keep working on that. So thank you.
But I guess I mentioned that because I don't think, Judith, it's your responsibility to make sure that everything coincides. I think it's our collective responsibility
Absolutely. Yeah.
as representatives of different commissions and committees.
Would it make sense, you know, I guess not necessarily hash this particular issue out when we're drafting this document, but when we break it down into actionable portions, the people who are responsible for, I guess, executing these goals, to go back to the, you know, different committees that are involved or boards that are involved to make sure that everybody is being represented at that point, rather than getting too bogged down with the language right now and making sure that everything is, you know, 100% above board and awesome at this stage.
Well, we did actually, if you look in the shared drive, Gina, under the, I think it's under the topics section, there is actually a document that Kat put together, which showed for each of the major themes, which were the kind of stakeholder boards, commissions and committees. So the idea was that the people in the working groups, and I know we've kind of moved away from working groups right now, the people in the working groups, which were the boards and committees that we were looking for them to reach out to. So we've got an initial kind of mapping of those committees and which ones map to the individual responsibilities. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, is that as we move down towards more detailed implementation planning, it'll be, that's the point at where we can go firm on who is responsible for what.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
trails, because there is a trails committee, but if, for example, we didn't have a trails committee, but this was one of the master plan actions, it would probably have to go to open space or to
For sure. Yeah.
commission, and they would then say,
Yeah.
well, it's not
that
me.
makes-
Or yes, it's me. I think the other point, just to highlight there, and we've talked about it in previous meetings, and I think it is really important, is when we come to implementation planning and assigning responsibility, we really need one group of people, one board or commission or committee to take responsibility for it. Because there are a number of plans that I've seen where there's multiple boards are responsible, and in my experience that simply doesn't work, because everyone just kind of goes, no, it's not no, someone else will do it, and we never move off the starting blocks when we do that. So, and it, it's definitely helpful in making people feel accountable for doing something if they're the only name that's in there.
No,
Well, I think the overall responsibility for the plan is the planning board, because it comes out of the planning board, and it's the
To your
planning board's charge to create it.
to your point, Judith, that about responsibility, having one accountable party, but does it make sense to have a primary and probably a secondary, so that you have a primary board, commissioner, committee responsible, and then it may also work with other boards, commissions, or committees to implement? So it might be one person, one organization is responsible, but it may have additional groups associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, very, very, very probably, I think in a number of different cases that will be the situation. My own personal view is that there's a risk that you get into try to put so much detail into it at this point in the process, or even when we have the full plan, that it's difficult to see the wood for the tree. So, if let's take this for an example, the Trails Committee says, well, absolutely, we're going to we're going to be responsible for this, but we also want open space, or actually, but we also want stewardship involved, because
Mhm.
they have responsibility for, you know, Breakneck Hill, and we think there's a big opportunity to get people involved there. I personally would say it's up to the Trails Committee to decide how they're going to action that recommendation, because otherwise I think there's a risk that we end up with this incredibly detailed action plan that never gets done. And if you've given it to the Trails Committee to say, this is your responsibility, are you all willing to sign up? You know, this is what you're signing up for. How you do it is up to you, and you can involve, you know, 10 other groups of people if you really want to, as long as it's done and, as you know, to the timeline that is agreed by that, you know, by your committee.
That creates great accountability. Judith, I agree with you. Yeah.
And Judith, I can't resist reinforcing a comment I made along the way here. Is I think that at least I've been looking around at other towns' master plans, and I think a lot of them suffer from the fact that it's a blizzard of stuff. You open it up and you start looking through, and you got a zillion things, any one of which is a wonderful thing to do, but you're left with, what do I do next, kind of thing out of there in terms of prioritization. And for me, at least, the missing link for Southborough has been, I think, leadership from the top, from the Board of Selectmen, in terms of pushing for these kind of things to happen, and also involvement of the schools, because the selectmen and the school committee are the ones that control the budget, the bulk of the bucks that flow in here. And if we come up with a wonderful plan and the planning board endorses it and pushes for it, et cetera, somehow I think it would be most effective if we can also derive a list of a manageable number, whether it's 5, 10, 15, whatever the number is, reasonably focused things for implementation, and get the right groups behind them in terms of having a committee responsible, budget to do some things, and support internally from the various organizations. Again, school committee and selectmen are the natural drivers for that process. I think that greatly increases our chances of getting something done. Personally, I'd rather get 5 things, important things done over the next 10 years than having a perfect list of 100 things that would be wonderful to do and not making much progress on them. And tough to prioritize, but I think that's the way you make progress with this stuff. And so down the road, I see that as a step for our process. And I think Gina made a great point that there's value in having a checkpoint at some point, maybe a couple of months down the line, as we get more flesh around this stuff, for people to go back to the related committees, commissions, et cetera, and just say, okay, guys, this is how it's looking. Is there anything in here that you have concerns about, et cetera, and speak up, get it in the process now, as opposed to waiting near the end, which I think we've done in the past too late to get people involved. So a lot of moving parts, but to me, communication and prioritization are key issues that we need to address going forward.
And I think, just building on that, Sam, one of my observations from the 2008 plan was that the prioritization was in effect done by assigning a timeline. And again, in my experience, it's better to prioritize based on the value, the doability, the actionability, or whatever it is that we just, you know, we decided the most appropriate criteria, and then say, okay, now let's just focus on the high priority ones and put together timelines for those. Because trying to, you know, come up with a timeline for something that we say, well, actually it's a low priority, it's kind of nice to have, and we want to do it within the next 10 years, but we don't know when it's going to get done, I think is really important as well. So that, you know, I think by separating out priority and dependency and having those criteria lead to a timeline could, I think, be very helpful for us, because we might find that there's some high priority things that, you know, we really, really think are important, but there's a big dependency there, and, you know, they may not happen for another year or two.
Yep, exactly. Just a practical issue. I don't know how others have done it. I'm having a hard time getting my head around this stuff. I think Judith, Sarah, others have done a great job in terms of organizing this, but it's hard for me to process on a spreadsheet. I wound up printing it on 4 tabloid-sized sheets and scotch taping them together and putting them up on the wall. And I think if you can sort of see it all at once, I think it's pretty impressive in terms of the scope and the organization here, and a great way to communicate. And maybe at some future public meeting or whatever, we do a big version of that to show people how the whole thing fits together, because I think it does fit together very nicely, logically, and consistently for the most part here. But it's,
Yeah.
again, hard for most normal humans, I think, to sort of absorb the whole thing and see how it fits. But when you see it, it's I think, very neat.
So I was going to ask you and or Melissa Danzo if there's any way we could actually get like bigger versions printed out on the map printer in the town.
DPW has a big printer they use for drawings that we've used in the past for large size display kind of things. So
Yeah.
if you ask nicely, they could arrange to do
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would be great to be able to get those and just to get, as long as it's not too expensive, just to get a copy for everybody to kind of like stick it on your wall and
Sure.
not to encourage
I
small
love that.
children. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure the 1-year-old
really
can
good idea,
have a
Judy.
great contribution, Gina. I'm sure they'll be great at coloring in the
color
priorities.
coding.
right. I could definitely check
be
with
so excited.
DPW and Melissa and see about getting, large scale prints for everybody, so that everybody can really look at it more functionally.
Yeah, anything that's a PDF, I think they can actually run off on their engineering drawing printer
Perfect.
down here. And
Great.
it's like I don't know, 3 or 4 feet tall, and it's a paper roll thing, so it can be very long.
We used to have a big display at the library, which of course people aren't in the library right now, but if the schools are open, I don't know if it's even something we could put in a public place where others could see it as well.
Also a really good idea.
Yeah.
For sure.
Senior
I
center when it opens.
A presentation at schools would not only, I think, prompt more public involvement, people who want to come and view these meetings, but I think it would really just serve a great amount to get the public, I guess, informed as to what's going on with this.
Yeah.
Although I'll just say from the school perspective, there will be no visitors at the schools right now. So, if you want to inform the
Little
staff,
first
that's
graders.
fine, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good for us to know.
Yeah,
Future
can I
planning.
just ask, can I just interject with something about the school? So I'm looking at the section, I opened this up on my computer and I'm looking at the section, continued strengthening of schools. And I'm going to connect with Roger about this a little bit more too. He did hand this off to me with some information, but if there's somebody that I could, it doesn't have to be done right now with everybody sitting here, but if I could connect with somebody about a little bit of background about all of this, because I'm looking at this list of things and they mostly end in question marks. So I don't know if that's
Katura, there was
intentional.
a subcommittee that was responsible for putting together this content that Roger was a part of. And I would say if you could just get the members of the subcommittee, I can give those to you, or Judith can, or
That
or
was
of
me and
course.
Roger. And
All right, I was going to say who was on the subcommittee.
Yeah,
They can answer the questions probably for you.
The original team was
yeah,
with
that's great.
Sam and Roger.
So I'll reach out
And
to her and
because
find a time.
I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking we can work through this and get rid of a bunch of the question marks and change some of these things, because we've just approved a new a vision, a new strategic plan for the schools. We just approved that at the end of this last academic year, and I think there's some overlap and some things we could integrate. And
and that's exactly what we're hoping. That others, that everyone on the committee can kind of go back and take another look at the recommendations, the goals and recommendations, and go, oh yeah, okay, now things have moved on, or I've thought about it over the summer, and this is what we want to refine it to. So this is by no means, in terms of the recommendations, these are by no means set in stone at this point. And I do think once we get onto the implementation planning part of it, which will kind of dovetail a little bit, and once you start to try and identify, well, how would you measure whether or not you've achieved this recommendation? Oftentimes that makes you think about, is this really something that we want to do? And if it is, well, how am I going to say that I've been successful in doing it? So okay, anyone got
Do we want to have any comment on specifics? I know I have some comments on downtown.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, we can go through it now, or people can send it to me separately. Either way, I'm fine.
I had a couple comments, Judith. I'll just send them to you. I think it'd be easier that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually behind schedule. I've got some comments, but I've got some other things I'm working on. So I need a little more time, and I will forward them to you, Judith, as I get more.
And hey, Karen, I know you mentioned some comments. Did you send those or?
No, I didn't. So I was a little unclear, Judith. So sorry about that. About whether or not I should send it directly to you, or if that was, if we should just talk about it during the meeting. Because when I got Mimi's message saying we're going to talk about during the meeting and be prepared, so I didn't send anything ahead of time. But most of what I was doing, it wasn't any critique except for that one example that related to the Trails Committee as opposed to the open space. But what I was trying to do is pull up the initial plan that we had with the Open Space and Green Committee and just make sure that everything that was in that initial plan was in the spreadsheet. And I started going through it kind of line by line. And so far, I believe it is. There's just some things that have been kind of moved around to your earlier points.
Okay.
To other categories. But I think it's all there.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, the biggest comments would be on who is the most responsible person for the item, which I think I totally agree with you is really important in terms of accountability. And as we start to fill that in, I think all of us will probably have comments on that as well.
So is that our next step is to continue to look at this and send comments to Judith? And then we'll discuss the comments at the next meeting? Is that how we want to go, or what's the consensus?
I think that makes sense. I guess I'd also think it would be helpful to sort of start thinking about next steps down the road. Maybe we're not ready quite yet, but I've been trying to think about what this plan ought to look like once we get more flesh built around some of these things and done some of the things we're talking about this evening. And again, as I've looked around at other communities, the thing that strikes me as being most helpful is having a stronger front end on the document. I've seen a couple that have basically given a brief summary of how we got here, and then laid out the top 10 or 10, 12 or 5 or whatever issues that have come out of the exercise to say these are the things that are most important over the next 5 years or whatever the appropriate time period is to focus on to make progress out of this effort. And again, it seems to me that that's a difficult task because different people obviously have different prioritizations. On the other hand, if we can somehow come up with a message at the front end of the document to get people's attention and focus and give them a guide maybe to, here's how you ought to read this, or here's how you ought to think about it, here's what you ought to look at in the document itself. Because most people, I think, are not going to have the patience to sit down and read a 100-page or whatever document with any strong focus. But if you help people get the sort of the short version, Cliff Notes version of it, I think that's a way to generate some support out there from folks who may be less focused on it, but interested in the concept and willing to be supportive as we go forward. So
That's a great idea.
Too soon now, but I think it's worth starting to think about and maybe working on an outline for what that kind of thing might look like, and get some feedback from the committee to say, are we going in the right direction with that as we put the sort of the guts of it together here in terms of the details. I see those as parallel tasks and worth starting to think about at least. So I would encourage people to.
I agree, Sam. And just to get tactical, and sorry for my ignorance because I missed the last meeting, or the last meetings. But when you are sharing this, Judith, this document, which is really helpful, I'm actually going into the Google Drive as well, and I'm starting to look at the documents that I reviewed ahead of time to try to be prepared for the meeting. Where is this document that you're showing right now? Because I'm on the spreadsheet right now and just trying to find the view that you're looking at. And I see in the folder for what we were supposed to prep for this, the model itself and the storyboard and the gold statements. I guess I think it would be helpful to maybe align on what specifically would be the most helpful document to give feedback on, so that we're all focusing on similar things.
I also couldn't find this particular document when I went to look to review the.
This was the 2020 Master Plan VOGRM model.
Yeah, so I have that open right now, and it
It
has
has
various
several tabs.
tabs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out which tab is this one. And
Oh,
then if we were to give feedback, like what would help the most? Like if we could kind of align on a sort of a communication strategy for that, so that you're getting feedback in a way that's helpful, Judith, to the overall document. And again, my apologies if that reflects ignorance on my part from not being in the last few meetings.
So so I'm sharing a version that's the version that I thought was in the shared drive. I'm not sharing the shared drive. So is it in Mimi?
The one that
meeting?
I'm looking at is August
Yeah.
26th, so I would think it would be the most recent. You know,
So
it's
it's
today.
the VOGRM model update. It's the second tab is what's being shown right now.
I see it now.
Okay. All right, great,
And the shared drive is what Judith said.
great.
In
So I
what-
guess then the question would be, as we review all of it, because I looked at everything before going into the meeting and a couple days ago as well, is there a certain part of the documents that we should try to give feedback on, or should we give feedback overall, or in a certain way that
And Karen, I've
that
been
would be most
focusing on
helpful?
things I was involved with in the subgroup world.
Right,
To
yeah,
make sure it's consistent there, and then lesser attention on other areas that I was involved in, just to see if there's anything that I think belongs in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, Karen. I actually built this from the vision document that the MAPC created, and
that
Sarah
we
and
each
I-
created, right, yeah.
and Sarah that Ralph created, and Sarah and I cross-checked that document against the individual objective statements that I'd sent Ralph in the first place. So
Perfect. Yeah.
they should be consistent, other than where I've moved things around a little bit. And as I said, anything that's been moved around is from the first version at the end of July is in blue in this version. So I'd say a couple of things. I'd say anyone who was involved in the original working groups to look to make sure that we've not missed anything, that there's nothing fallen through the cracks.
Yeah.
But also I think just to look at it, I guess a bit more holistically for your section and say, is there anything else that we want to add to this? So, recognizing that the OSRP is just, I think it's now been approved. Is there anything that's really important in the OSRP that you actually want to say, well, we really should have that in the master plan as well as in the OSRP, even though we know they're not going to be consistent. And I think it's fine that they're not consistent. And one of the things we've talked about is in the text around the final report saying the OSRP report was built first and the MAPC, it shouldn't ever be at odds with the OSRP, but there may be things in one report that's not in the other.
Yeah, it's like a Venn diagram. Yeah, there'll be overlaps and separate things.
And then I think
Yeah.
anybody who has any comments on any other section, I think is fair game. So if someone feels really strongly that we need to, here's a good example on the enhanced sense of community. We've kind of got a couple of placeholders here, but we really didn't kind of flesh those out in the original objectives. So if you've got things that you feel would be really good to add into that section, I think feel free to say, well, can we add this back in as well? Because that's very much in keeping with our original approach where we all came together to brainstorm what was going to be important for this plan. And then we broke into our little groups to kind of really focus on the detail. And I think now's the opportunity to come back as a bigger group and say, hey, you know, I remember we talked about this and it doesn't appear to go into the plan. So, you know, we've got, you know, well over a year's worth of experience across, you know, a number of people here. So I think it would be great to do that.
And at least for the sections I was involved in, I think you've done an amazing job, Judith, being really comprehensive. I took the two documents side by side, the original breakout group discussion and then this plan, and all the major points were in there. In some cases I had to look for them because they'd been slightly moved, but that was okay. So I think that's a good plan. And then I sent the previous plan to my commission, and they made some edits, and I sent those to Mimi, and those were incorporated as well in here. So from my perspective, when I tried to think of what feedback would I have, the only place that I felt was still open was making sure that there was clear accountability for each item.
Karen, good point. I've read through it myself based on my failing memory. It looked to be very consistent with the conversations we've had
I
with
agree.
this committee along the way.
Yeah,
And,
which is
there may be
huge.
places where we go back and redo some things. One practical suggestion, as people are giving feedback to Judith on this, given the spreadsheet structure, it might be helpful for people just as they make a comment to say, in column L, row 22, here's a comment on this particular entry, which works for most of it. There are a couple of paste-in blocks in here that you can refer to by the title on it, whatever. But to be specific as possible in making the comments, it's helpful as you're working through.
That's great, Sam. It's part of what I meant by like trying to figure out what's the best way to give feedback. Because I've also heard conflicting things about the fact that we as committee members can't make edits on Google Docs, but we could send edits to Judith. Is that right?
Right. That's what I would plan to do, is say, Judith, this particular block at cell L22 or whatever it is, I would add this language, or I'd do this, whatever with it, something like that, to at least narrow it down where we're focused.
Mimi, can I ask, when is our next meeting scheduled for?
So what's on our calendar for 2020 is September 23rd, but I was going to run that by the committee to see if they want to keep that, if that still works. But that was on the original 2020 calendar.
So if that's on the original calendar, if I could make a suggestion that maybe we have all of our comments to Judith, or comments, changes or whatnot within 2 weeks. So that gives her a week's time to be able to compile it and then put it back in the Google Drive to give us an ample opportunity to review it before the meeting on the 23rd. Again, I don't want to overwhelm Judith either, because I don't think there's going to be like a ton of changes, but I want her to not be overwhelmed with, you know, suddenly you never know what you don't know, and everybody could have a ton of feedback.
Right. The only thing is that you can't put the edited version back on the Google Drive until it's been
Correct.
by the
Correct.
committee. So
Okay.
So maybe by Friday the 11th or something
Yeah.
would give Judith.
Yeah. I think that would be good, Sam.
yeah.
And is it admissible? I think it is, right? That like if I wanted to have a call with Judith and just say, let me go over some of the things that I thought about, and she could share her screen, we can do that, right? The two of us together.
Absolutely. What you can't do is then serially have Judith or you talk to 3 other people about the same stuff. If it's all point to one single person, that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that would be great, you know, and I think we've now got, you know, we've got I think a good continuity between people that were on the original committee and kind of our new members, that I think putting that together is going to give us some, you know, some really good feedback. And
And as far as the 2008 master goal list, do we want to go through that? I know I had some things that I don't think are relevant anymore, or
So that's what actually, that's a really good point, Mimi. I forgot to say that. I put these are the goals from last time, and these were the goals, not the 107 recommendations, which are in the document on the shared folder anyway. But I put them on here really just almost as a kind of a check and balance to say, is there anything still on, was there anything on this goal list that we know we didn't achieve, but we still feel that we want to do it and it's not in this list,
Right.
it's not in the current list,
okay.
you know? So I don't know, I'm looking to, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I haven't done a specific cross check, but that would be a good one to do, to highlight things that any of us feels, oops, we missed that one. It's still important, and for whatever reason, it slipped between the cracks.
Yeah.
I don't plan to spend a lot of time focusing on these because the world has changed, and we got a strong set of objectives now from our recent activities.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would take a ton of time to go through these, individually either. And like you said, Sam, not to spend a ton of time, but I think we could kind of flip through these relatively quickly and see if there's anything that's still pertinent to what we're doing now.
Yep.
And my other question was, is there anything, so when we fleshed all this out, originally it was BC, before Corona. Is there anything
I like that.
due to this, current time that we should add any goals or recommendations to the master plan? Has anything changed or come up, or, and not just Corona, there are other, what popped into my mind was the municipal racial equity plans that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for all of us to think about Corona and Black Lives Matter and the current sort of world that we're living in, I think that was also in our survey as well. We added, based on Corona, are there other things that people think about? But this is a time to make sure that it's current.
We added that, but MAPC did not follow through with it.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
Editorial license, huh? I think a good point, Mimi. I think one of the things where I see an issue is that I think there could be some real pressures in terms of fiscal impact of coronavirus on towns' finances. And so that, to me, comes into the implementation part to say, we have a list of things that pre-corona we might have taken on, but now there's such fiscal pressure that we just don't have the resources to do it. So I think that will all sort of filter out during that process, and we're likely to get a different answer in terms of how much we bite off here versus had coronavirus not appeared. But I'm, I guess, still struggling with how that was going to change the things that come on this list of priorities at this point, but it's certainly worth considering carefully.
Yeah, I wonder what will happen to
Development Council sent something around to most of the committees this past week. They have a bunch of objectives based upon the impact of coronavirus on the community. Are any of, is there a way of getting those objectives either reviewed or included in this also?
Bill, I couldn't hear you very well. Whose list was that? Who sent it?
Economic development.
Bill, your sound is sounding very staticky. I think maybe, I don't know if it's where your microphone is next to your.
It's sort of right in front of my face here. Let me lean forward. I can try. The Economic Development Council sent around a, let's see if I can get the detail on it. It was the update on Economic Development Committee from August 2020. And it had a bunch of objectives here that seemed to have an impact on what they thought should be done in the community. Self-sufficiency, the opening or the possibility of establishing businesses within private houses, things of that nature.
Yeah, it was sent out from John Wood. It went to all of the boards, I think.
It did, yes.
Yeah,
From
the
my
August newsletter kind of thing, update.
thing.
Yeah, so that, what you're referring to, Bill, was just an article that they published in there. Like,
So that's not, it has nothing to do with what they intend to, what they believe should be objectives?
no, as far as I know, that it's never been discussed at the committee. It was just an article that was added to the newsletter.
Why in hell did they send it?
That was written by a guy, Charles Mayron or something like that. Wrote
Yeah.
it. Good
It
thought.
was, yes, right. I didn't know if that was something that they felt should be included in this sort of thing.
Not
Well,
explicitly, but worth considering, certainly.
yeah, certainly. Well, we do have Julie from the Economic Development Committee is a member of this committee. So I would hope that she would look at those things and see if any of those need to be added.
Okay. Sounds good.
So can I just go back, if everyone can still see the screen? A couple of things I think we do want to get discussed, pinned down here. What I call the position statement, but also the vision. Okay, so if you were to go back to the original, to the 2008 report, the report cover had this, it was almost like a branding on it that I've called the position statement. And this is what it's the master plan for Southborough. The strapline was preserving our past, protecting our future. And then the actual vision. So this was, what is the overall purpose, the long-term, intent of the master plan was this: to preserve Southborough's classic rural New England character and charm while enhancing the village centers and neighborhoods. So I think to what you were saying, Sam, that's the attempt to say, how would we say that our master plan is different than any other towns, whether it's, Wellesley or, wherever. So I guess I do think we need to decide, are we okay to stick with these? I mean, oftentimes if it's a vision, there's a school of thought on visioning that would say you never achieve a vision. So it's always good just to try and keep the same one unless something radically changes and you want to update it. So
I'd vote for reconsidering these. I guess maybe it's just my own personal preference, but I think these are fine, but I see them as too passive, frankly. So preserve, protect, is good, and enhancing gets a little more proactive, but I think there are places where we might want to say we want to be more active going forward on things. So I mean, again, I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I think that it's worth reconsidering those and seeing if other folks have different thoughts about that, and maybe do a little wordsmithing on these before we accept them.
I also wonder if, in fact, those stated objectives are, in some sense, in conflict with our desire to develop a sense of community.
Yeah, maybe. And again, the diversity thing that we just mentioned, to me is interesting aspect there, which is tied in with sense of community and activities that we might consider now that we didn't consider 10 years ago or 15 years ago when we did this. So my view is anything is fair game from last time to reconsider at least, and not necessarily change, but rethink.
Right, so we should be thinking about what we want Southborough to look like in the future, where we are, where we want to go.
Yeah, I think you captured it well when you said that in last time, Mimi. I think it was in the minutes. It's like that's what we, that's what we have to try and put into a catchy little phrase and then be able to describe it. So, whoever stands up in front of the town meeting can go, this is what our master plan is all about.
Yep. Need somebody with marketing expertise to come up with a catchy phrase.
Well, that rules me out. That's good.
Me too.
Me too.
That's
Know the objective.
I have no expertise, so that rolls me up.
Hey, Mimi, can I back up for a second here?
Sure.
I see that Tim Davis has joined us. I don't know when Tim joined, but Tim, if you missed the original conversation about the rec piece of this plan, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, but we've had less input from rec on this historically. And I think previously this evening, we talked about Mimi, Judith reaching out to you to confirm that what we have here is directionally correct, at least, and to integrate pieces from the planning work that you and your team have done recently to make sure that we've got the latest version of what you folks think needs to be in here. We've got time to do this now, but we would greatly value your input to the structure here, and delighted to have you participate.
Hey, Sam, it's Kristen. And hopefully this is okay. I was delegated by Tim
Okay.
because he is off the next couple of days. And I know Jen
Okay.
was reaching out to see if he could delegate. They are working on seeing if they can get our kind of position back and I step in Dave's place. When I joined earlier, there was conversation, so I wasn't comfortable interrupting. I wasn't
Okay.
sure, like,
No
I
problem.
wasn't sure if there was audience or not, and so I hadn't heard back from Jen, so I've been listening. I will fully admit that, like, we're hoping that I can step in for rec, as as the representative member of the rec commission. So admittedly, I actually just sent Jen a text and said we need to get feedback, and I noted all that and the dates in which we need to do so, but I need to get caught up to speed. So I truly hope it's not an issue that I've been listening on Tim's behalf. But if our position on the commission is reinstated, I'll be taking that over.
Okay, good. And it's a public meeting, so I'm
Okay,
sure everybody's welcome. And again, strong rec input would be great here,
Yeah.
wherever it comes from. Kristen, do you guys have a copy of this matrix that we're looking at? Have you downloaded that?
I'm sure Tim or Jen probably
Okay,
do.
it's on the shared drive, so
Okay.
it would be useful.
I'm not
And
positive I have access to it, but Jen or
Kristen, this
Jen-
is Karen, and just
Hey.
for also additional context, back in April, I'm just looking at my records, or it was like April 17th, actually, if he looks back in his email, I sent an email to Tim and to Dave, just with the initial draft of the open space, green initiatives and rec. And so he has that, I think, in his records as well, but then what Judith has on the drive is much more updated.
Okay. I'll work with both of them to get that, and we will.
Yeah.
I know the date in which you need feedback by. In fact, we'll try to get it a little bit sooner because we might have a little bit more feedback. Given perhaps you haven't gotten as much feedback, so we'll try to get that earlier than the date that was agreed to today.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you.
So Kristen, so I'll just put in a plug here for my friend Karen, because she was the team leader of a group of our kind of 3 objective theme around open space and environmental and green and recreation. So she spearheaded putting together with myself and Kat and Bill those original objectives, kind of goals and recommendations. So she would be a great person to connect with as well. I'm volunteering you, Karen.
Yeah, I'm happy to be volunteered. That's why I spoke out to say.
She can explain
Yeah.
some of the kind of
Yeah.
iterations and the conversation that we had around it, which might be helpful for you.
That'd be very helpful. I appreciate it.
You can see my name here. I have a little complicated name, but and feel free to reach out to me if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, and I can show you some of those back documents that I sent to Dave and Tim earlier.
Okay, absolutely. I will be reaching out, Karen. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thanks.
I like your new name, Kristen.
Oh,
Going
well,
under
let's
an
see.
assumed identity now.
I think I've showed up in a couple of Board of Selectmen meetings as Ryan Lavault, so I'm getting there.
One step ahead of the bill collectors. Huh?
Exactly.
Okay, do we all have our marching orders for the next meeting? Is there anything else?
I think I got more marching orders than marching ability, but I'll try to work that out.
Anything else, Judith?
No, I think that would be great. I think, just to recap, look at the areas that you were either originally involved in, like green and open space, and met with Karen. And if you're a new participant on the committee, like, Katura or Kristen, look at those areas that are obviously related to your area of representation speciality. But absolutely, all and any perspectives, feedback on any aspect of the plan, I think will be really welcome, because that does reflect the approach that we've taken as a commission, we're a committee, aren't we? Are we a committee? You're throwing me here, Kat, you're throwing me. That we as a committee have taken all along. And then if everybody could take a look at the position statement and vision, and you don't feel that you have to wordsmith it down to the nth degree, but just if you have a particular idea or some bullets that you want to fire over, then just send those over to me, and we can put something together or to do that. So
could I just ask a quick question? So so the comments by September 11th, are those, I'm wondering about timeline and process. So is this sort of final product zone that we're in here? Are we still editing and working through? How sort of where are we in the timeline?
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Katura, long term, we've talked about having a document for presentation to town meeting in spring of 2021.
Okay.
And that's a long, fair time away. On the other hand, there's not a lot of time between now and then work-wise. So we're still grinding to get all the pieces in place over the next several months here, and then early part of 21 to do the polishing and final stuff.
Excellent.
Sort of
All right. Thank you.
historically. Mimi, I've got a process question. As I've been thinking ahead, are we basically done with MAPC now? Because I think there's going to be some effort to come up with exhibits and update data and so forth that MAPC potentially could help with, but I thought we were out of budget for them. So we need to think about resources to do that as well, I think.
Well, Ralph promised to finish up. So we had the vision statement that needed editing, and he,
But what is Ralph's view of what needs to be finished up?
well, whatever we send him that needs to be
Other
edited.
than Ralph himself.
I think, I think when Sarah and I looked at this, I think our view was it's making sure that the data is properly sourced and is, internally consistent. Was probably one of the most important things that we can get Ralph to do.
Good. I think I thought some great exhibits in the that the MAPC guys did for our visioning session. That would be, I think, interesting to think about including in whatever the final report is. And so making sure we've got current versions of some of those things, some of the maps, and some of the things in the open space and rec plan, I think are very interesting. Although again, that one is a little dated now. So I think it would be helpful to have some ability to go through there and make sure we've got relatively current data within the last couple of years for these things. And again, that's more of a production thing later on, but planning for it could be helpful to avoid a crunch at the end.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, you were speaking with Melissa Danza to see if we could get electronic copies of the map book that was used by the MVP consulting group
Yep.
for that MVP stakeholder meeting?
Yes. So there are several maps within that map set that would be applicable to this document, and that are more current, for example, like the land use than Ralph provided. So definitely working on getting a digital copy of those to insert at least a few of them into this document.
Mhm. And Sarah, I have scanned versions of those, but I don't
Okay.
have the original versions, which would be greater accuracy, fidelity, or whatever. So if
I
you-
have an original hard copy of those.
I got an original hard copy that I scanned, which is
Oh.
Okay,
not
great.
as good as the original one.
Yeah, we're hoping, Melissa hasn't received those digitally yet from the consultant, but she said that they are forthcoming, and we have a plan set in the office too. So a scanned version, might work in a pinch, but I think we will be able to get our hands on those actual shape files pretty soon.
Great. Great.
And would it be helpful if I put examples of master plans from other towns on the shared drive?
Sure.
I think so, yeah.
I-
I've collected a few. I'd
That would be
happy to
great,
send you.
Mimi. Yeah.
You said you had some, Sam?
I've collected a few. I've been looking. I'll send you a few that I've found.
Okay.
Mimi,
Not many current. It's surprising. There's some places who don't seem to have one for the last 20 years. But I think it's still useful to look at some of those from a formatting and structure standpoint to get some ideas.
Yeah.
Mimi, would it be possible for you to email all of us a kind of specific references to the Google Drive documents we should be looking at again?
Sure. I think I did on Monday.
You did.
And that was helpful. Thank you.
But if you would do it
Mimi.
again, I'd appreciate it.
Mimi.
Okay. I will, when I upload anything, I send out the link again. So do you want me to
I'm just
send you today's again, or?
Yes, please, just. so
Okay.
I know that.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if it might be useful to create like another folder that is really visible when you go straight into the drive with the most current version of the storyboard and the model, because then, I mean, we can keep the other ones in the meeting kind of folders, but just to pull out the most recent one and put it in there at the top of the drive. Do you know what I
I
mean?
agree. And then you can
So
put
like a recent file folder or something?
Current documents folder.
like a source material.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I think it might have been part of the reason why people are lacking in their feedback is just knowing how to give the feedback and which documents to give feedback on. So, because there's so much great information in there. So I think it's clear now to all of us how to do that.
Okay. So should we move on to chairs reports, members reports?
Sure.
I don't have anything. Do any members have anything they want to add?
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
Another comment? I actually, and Lisa certainly has her own view of this one, I'm sure, but I'm actually very encouraged by what I'm hearing from our Board of Selectmen meetings in terms of the goal setting activity that we're engaged in now. I think there, at least my personal view is there seems to be a lot more energy and participation in that than I can recall. And I think that's a great opportunity to connect what we do in the Master Plan Committee with what the selectmen eventually conclude that we want to push for, to again make sure that there is maximum opportunity to get resources and support throughout the town for things that might happen. I'd rather have several things that this committee is less eager for, but the selectmen are behind and willing to put resources behind, that we can get something done, and forego some things that in a perfect world maybe we'd like to have, but trade off for something that's more likely to happen and be supported managerially better over the next 5 years here. So again, it's a difficult balance to reach, but I think going forward, if we can keep a close eye on that, and Lisa and I will certainly be prepared to talk about that as we go along, but I think that's an important success component here as we go forward, for being able 5 years down the road to look back and said, yeah, we got these 3 or 4 critical things done, significant visible progress versus where we started here. And that, I think, can help coordinate resources to make that happen. So again, just sort of a keep our eyes open kind of thing, but an important dimension, I think.
I agree, Sam. And the one thing I'll also add to that as well is having the capital committee up and running as well. I know Sam had forwarded over some information from master plan over there to Jason, and I know we had a brief discussion about it. So I think it's key lines of communication, and I'm invigorated by the board. I think we're going, I agree, Sam, the goal setting meeting was really, really exciting. And I think there's a lot of things that we can tie in with what the board's doing as well.
Exactly. I'm cautiously optimistic as well.
Very good. Anyone else?
Let me just advise everyone that the EDA committee, through Mark Purple, are putting together or have led a series of bids out to do an ADA-based self-evaluation for the city. I suspect a lot of committees are going to be involved in that. I don't know if any findings will change their priorities or identify priorities that should go in this sort of thing. But in any case, there's going to be something like that within the next couple of months available or initiated within the community.
Good news.
Mimi, can I add one final thing from me?
Certainly.
I just wanted to say, Judith, thank you so much. That document that we've just spent the last hour going over is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I thought I was very good with Excel, and I will tell you, you have blown my expectations away of myself. And I just want to say thank you. I know you put a lot of time and a lot of energy into that. And I think we're all certainly benefiting from the great job that you did. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Ditto.
it. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Very
So much
impressive.
good
When you put it on a
information.
wall, can you see the whole thing? It really hangs together very well.
Yeah, thank you. I was impressed seeing it all on a spreadsheet of how much work we've done.
Great work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm considering wallpapering my living room wall with the large version. Still
I'm
negotiating.
sure your wife will love that.
My wife is not yet convinced.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the great strength of it too is how holistic it is, how you've connected all the dots in terms of what the state requires and what we've talked about and what our initial subcommittees did. So it makes it very comprehensive. Yeah, really, really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were a good grab, Judith.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to Melissa today about some of the Conservation Commission stuff, and she said, like, what else are you doing? And I said, well, the master plan. And she said, we totally lucked out when you volunteered to do that, because none of the guys on the Conservation Commission would have had much appetite for joining the master plan. So it was all good timing, I think.
Our gain. So thank you. Are we gonna do minutes, Mimi? Is that on the list? I can't remember.
Yes. July 29th, 2020. Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
I had a question. The minutes said AM. My calendar said we met PM. I can't remember. Maybe we didn't.
It was PM last time, I think.
It
Yeah.
was.
Thank you for picking that up. I will change that.
Maybe I was asleep that day or something. That was my only comment.
Oh, there we go. All right,
You're
thanks. I'll
obviously
fix that.
lounging in that little nook that you've got there, Sam.
That's right.
I am concerned that your plants don't seem to be growing though.
That's right.
They need water.
Pasted in background.
I know.
Any other comments on the minutes? Do
No,
I?
It
a motion?
continues to amaze me, Miss Kathleen, how you put those together. I tell you,
I'm glad that they're working for you guys.
you
Good
are
on you,
doing a stellar job there.
Another masterpiece.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 29th, 2020,
As amended.
as amended?
So moved.
In a second?
I'll
Second,
second the motion.
Karen.
And we need a roll call vote. Latrell, yes. Stivers,
Yes,
Watson,
Yes.
Sines,
Yes.
Martin.
I'll just abstain. I know I can technically vote, but I wasn't there, so.
Okay. Savidovich,
Yes.
Braccio,
Yes.
McKee,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Joyce. No?
Joyce?
Okay. And so the next meeting, unless someone wants to change the date, is scheduled for September 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Sounds good
Yep.
to me.
Yes.
Sadly, I have no other commitments.
unless
Everything
somebody offers
is-
a better deal.
Everything is cancelled.
It's my
In my-
anniversary, but I'll be here.
In my calendar,
Aw.
it still says the meeting is in the senior center, which would be hopeful. Wouldn't it be great if we could all be back in the senior center then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Yeah,
No.
probably not.
I'm still waiting for Kathleen to bring around the cocktails as well. But
Right.
I was going to say you can all visit me in the senior center for early voting. That's the most I've been in there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So everyone get comments to Judith by September 11th.
Auspicious day.
Yes. And do I have an emotion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
In a second.
Second.
And roll call vote again. Latrell, yes. Stivers,
Yes,
Watson,
Yes.
Sines,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Davidovich,
Yes.
Braccio,
Lisa and Kat, yes.
Hmm.
Key,
Oh, yes, yes. I'm sorry. I was distracted by the cat.
cat.
Warren,
Yes.
McNauskis. Right. Okay. I guess Joyce can't hear us, or
I don't know.
She may be muted still.
She's unmuted at the moment.
Going for drinks.
all right. Thank you, everyone.
Alrighty,
Thanks,
thanks.
guys. Stay
All
Happy
right.
Labor Day.
Thank
Thank you.
around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see everyone.
You too. Welcome, Katura.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I could finally make it.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Have a good
Good night.
night.